Tshey Bennett's body was found days later, discarded in a secluded pond. The location, Mobile, Alabama, was 50 miles away from where she had last been seen. She was alone in a hotel room. Just hours earlier, she had been checking in, casually extending her stay. But now, her body was floating, cold and lifeless in water. Her phone had gone silent. Her last text, sent hours earlier, spoke of plans for the weekend. "See you Sunday. Can't wait to tell you about this crazy week." But she never showed up. Sheriff Chip Simmons, the lead investigator, paused as he spoke of the case. "We never could have imagined what we'd uncover after that. The case unfolded in ways we didn't expect. The investigation led us to a man we never thought would be capable of such violence." What happened between the walls of that hotel room? How did an active duty Marine, stationed just miles away, become the man at the center of it all? A reality TV star, a single mother, dead. A Marine, a predator, on the run. In the hours to come, you'll understand how a pre-planned murder, deceptive behavior, and digital evidence connected a man who appeared to be above reproach to a crime that shocked the community. The search for Tshey Bennett's killer was only just beginning, but the truth was far darker than anyone had imagined. Tshey Bennett was a 26-year-old woman whose life had been shaped by a deep desire to provide the best future for her son. On the surface, she might have seemed like another reality TV star, having appeared on Scripper Boot Camp. But there was far more to her story than what could be captured on a screen. Tshey was a mother, an aspiring businesswoman, and a woman determined to make her way through life's challenges, no matter how difficult they seemed. Raising her 8-year-old son as a single mother in a world that often seemed unforgiving, Tshey wore many hats. By day, she was a mother who dedicated herself to her son's well-being, attending school events, cooking meals, and making sure that he never went without. It wasn't always easy, but her determination never wavered. Every decision, every sacrifice, every late-night study session was done with one goal in mind, to create a better life for him. But by night, she found herself in a world that often pushed her to her limits. As a dancer and escort, she worked tirelessly to provide for her son, traveling from city to city, following the work, and doing what she had to do to pay the bills. It wasn't a job she had chosen for the glamour or the fame. It was simply a means to an end. She had dreams, big ones, but survival came first. It was the life she had been forced to live, but not the life she had envisioned for herself. She used her job as a stepping stone, always keeping one eye on the future and never losing sight of what mattered most to her. Tshey had aspirations, dreams that reached far beyond the world she was in. She had always dreamed of earning her business degree. That degree wasn't just a piece of paper to her. It was a ticket out, a way to break free from the cycle she had found herself in. It was a way to secure financial stability and, ultimately, to give her son the kind of life that she had always wanted but never had. She kept a journal filled with plans, dreams of opening a community resource center for single parents, a place where no one had to choose between earning a living and caring for their children. It wasn't just a dream. It was a vision, one that she worked toward every single day. It was her way of giving back, of ensuring that other parents didn't have to face the same hardships she had. But beyond her dreams and aspirations, Tshey was also a real person, someone with strength, vulnerability, and a deep love for her family. Those who knew her described her as someone who would light up a room with her laughter. Her smile was infectious, her presence magnetic. Despite her struggles, Tshey managed to keep the people around her close. She wasn't just a reality TV star or a working woman. She was a mother, a friend, a daughter, someone who cared deeply about the world around her. Her phone contained hundreds of pictures, memories of her son's birthdays, weekend trips, impromptu dance parties in their living room, and those quiet moments when they simply read together before bed. These moments captured the essence of Tshey, a woman who worked hard, but who also cherished the small joys in life. It was a cold afternoon on December 13th, 2024, when Tshey Bennett decided to extend her stay at the Sweet Dreams Inn in Pensacola, Florida. She had been traveling across states, following the work, and as was her routine, she felt comfortable enough to settle in for another night. The inn had become familiar, a temporary refuge between appointments, and there was nothing about that day that felt different from any other. She checked in with the front desk, making a casual conversation with a receptionist as she confirmed her extended stay. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore a blue sweater and jeans, casual, yet composed. Tshey smiled, checked her phone, and joked about how she couldn't wait to return home to her son. There was no sign of distress in her voice or in her mannerisms. She was, by all appearances, relaxed, and it seemed like she had nothing to worry about. Just another night before the busy weekend ahead. Her last text was sent at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time that same day. "See you Sunday. Can't wait to tell you about this crazy week." It was lighthearted, completely unremarkable, and filled with the kind of upbeat enthusiasm that reflected her usual energy. She had no way of knowing that in just a few hours, everything would change. Tshey's communication went silent after that, her phone shutting down for reasons unknown, but she wasn't the type to ignore messages. It wasn't like her to go dark, especially when she had plans to meet friends and family in the coming days. Her friend reached out a few times that afternoon, but there was no reply until the next morning. The unanswered calls, the empty silence, were the first signs something was wrong. December 14th, concerned family members called the hotel staff and agreed to do a welfare check. It was then that the hotel staff began to notice something unusual. The door to room 217 was slightly ajar, a curious detail considering the hotel's automatic locking mechanism. It wasn't unusual for guests to forget to lock the door, but the way it stood open, almost like it had been pushed, raised questions. Inside, the room was disheveled. The bed linens were thrown about, and personal items were scattered on the floor. Clothes, makeup, and papers were left in a disorderly manner, far from the neat packing or unpacking process the staff had seen earlier that day. Her wallet with her ID was still on the nightstand, and yet there was no sign of Tshey herself. What struck them as most unsettling, however, were the two phones, both belonging to Tshey, found in the bathtub, waterlogged and powered off. One was her personal phone, and the other was used primarily for work. Neither had been damaged intentionally, but the way they had been placed in the bathtub felt like a deliberate act. It was as though the phones had been discarded, cast aside, in a way that felt strangely calculated. This was no accident. As the hotel staff scanned the room further, they found something else. A PlayStation power cord tucked under the bed, partially wedged against the wall. At first glance, it seemed like a minor detail, but as the investigation would reveal, it would later prove to be a key piece of evidence, one that would connect the suspect to the scene of the crime. At first, it was regarded as just a missing person case, but the first signs that this might be more than a simple missing person case came when investigators began to examine the security footage from the hotel. Surveillance showed a red Mazda CX-5, a rental car, arriving at the hotel at 1:30 p.m. on December 13th, just after Tshey had checked in. The footage clearly showed Ellington, an active-duty Marine, who had rented the car just hours before the meeting with Tshey, entering the building and heading to her room. But it wasn't just Ellington entering the hotel. The cameras captured him leaving roughly 2 hours later, alone. But this time was something else. He was carrying a large duffel bag, which he hadn't arrived with. The bag seemed unusually heavy for a man traveling alone, and it raised immediate questions about what he might have been carrying. The footage left little room for doubt. Something had happened in that room, and Ellington was involved. Ellington, a 20-year-old Marine, stationed at Naval Air Station Pensacola, initially appeared to be an unlikely suspect. He had no prior criminal record, and to the public, he was seen as a disciplined, respectable young man. His role in the Marine Aviation Training Support Group gave him a certain prestige, and his military background seemed to place him outside the scope of suspicion. Before the murder, Ellington and Tshey had no prior relationship. Their connection had been purely transactional. Tshey had advertised her escort services online, and Ellington had sought out her services. In a world where many people remained anonymous behind screens and digital profiles, their meeting was a brief, unremarkable exchange at first. Tshey, a single mother trying to make ends meet, had no reason to suspect the man who contacted her for an appointment. Ellington, a young active-duty Marine, presented himself as just another client. By December 18th, investigators had pieced together enough digital breadcrumbs to track Willie Ellington's movements. His phone data showed a clear route, from Pensacola, Florida, across state lines into Mobile, Alabama. That signal briefly reconnected near an isolated, overgrown area, a forgotten corner of a once-planned neighborhood that had long since been abandoned. It was there in a shallow, murky pond choked with debris and fallen branches that Tshey Bennett's body was found. She had been dumped like trash, face down in the cold water, her body beginning to decompose after days in the elements. The pond was remote, hard to reach without specific directions, and surrounded by thick brush. It wasn't the kind of place you stumbled upon. It was chosen deliberately. Investigators believed the location was strategic. Not only was it across state lines, complicating jurisdiction and slowing down immediate law enforcement response, but it also bought Ellington time. It was a place no one regularly passed by, no surveillance cameras, no accidental discovery. He knew that if her body stayed hidden long enough, his trail might grow cold. This deliberate choice of location was reflected in one of Ellington's Google searches too. His search history showed he had asked, "Can a murderer be convicted without a body?" This in itself points to careful planning. Then, Ellington tried to escape on December 18th, 2024, the same day Tshey's body was found in a pond in Mobile, Alabama. Ellington attempted to flee the scene. The authorities had been closing in on him, and he knew it. Rather than face the inevitable, he decided to take matters into his own hands, boarding a bus in Pensacola, heading towards Alabama, hoping to distance himself from the growing investigation. However, law enforcement had already been tracking his movements, and the moment he tried to leave, they knew. Authorities set up surveillance at the bus station in Opelika, Alabama, and when Ellington arrived, they were ready. His attempt to escape had failed, and he was arrested as he tried to slip out of town, hoping to evade justice. After his arrest in Opelika, Alabama, law enforcement knew they had to act quickly. With the growing pile of digital evidence and the undeniable connection to Tshey Bennett's murder, the pressure was mounting. The next step was to confront Ellington directly, to make him face the facts and hope for a breakthrough. As the investigation moved forward, authorities began to dive deeper into Ellington's digital footprint. It didn't take long for investigators to seize his phone, and when they started going through it, the disturbing discoveries mounted. On Ellington's phone, the search history told a chilling story. There were questions that no one would ever want to ask unless they were preparing for something terrible. What does a dead body look like after 2 days? How many prostitute murders go unsolved? Can a murderer be convicted without a body? If you're strangled, can you still scream? These weren't just idle curiosities. They were premeditated questions, ones that indicated a dark and troubling intent long before the crime had even taken place. And these searches weren't happening after the murder. They were made before Ellington's encounter with Tshey. The timing of these questions, combined with the Google searches, revealed that the murder was planned, not a spur-of-the-moment act. Ellington's every move, from renting the car to searching for information on how bodies decompose, painted a clear picture of a man who had thought through every step of his crime. When Ellington was arrested on December 18th, just days after Tshey's body was found, investigators seized his PlayStation console. However, what was alarming was that the cord that should have come with the console was missing. At that point, the PlayStation cord found under the bed in the hotel room was linked to the one missing from Ellington's console. This discovery confirmed that the PlayStation cord wasn't just a random object. It was a crucial piece of the puzzle, directly linking Ellington to the crime scene. The connection to strangulation became clear when forensic experts analyzed the scene and the evidence. Investigators confirmed that manual strangulation was the cause of Tshey's death. Ellington was brought in for interrogation soon after his arrest. The room was cold, sterile, and silent, save for the soft hum of the lights above. As he sat across from detectives, he tried to keep his composure. Detective Carla Jensen leaned forward, looking Ellington dead in the eye. "We have your phone records, your Google searches. We know what happened at the hotel that day. The evidence is clear, Willie. You're not going to get out of this." At first, Ellington tried to remain calm, offering denials and claiming he had no idea what they were talking about. "I didn't do anything," he said, his voice unsteady. "I don't know why you're accusing me." But the detectives weren't fazed. They already had the evidence. They just needed him to crack. And the breakthrough came when they presented his own phone. Detective Jensen placed a phone on the table in front of him. "We've got your searches, Ellington. We know you looked up, what does a dead body look like after 2 days? We know you Googled, how many prostitute murders go unsolved? You were planning this, weren't you?" The silence in the room grew heavier, and for the first time, Ellington's eyes flickered, just for a moment, before he looked down at the table. He knew the game was up. His attempts to deflect were fading fast. As if the gravity of the murder charge was enough, detectives uncovered something even darker within Ellington's digital footprint. The phone they had seized from him contained disturbing, heinous material, 35 separate files of child pornography. Some of the videos and images depicted children as young as 9 years old, enduring acts of abuse so graphic that it made even the most seasoned officers recoil. This wasn't just a man capable of murder. This was a man whose actions hinted at a pattern of behavior, one that ran far deeper than anyone had anticipated. The discovery of these files only solidified the horror surrounding Ellington's true character. It wasn't just about the murder of Tshey Bennett. There was something much darker beneath the surface. His interest in children, his access to these materials, and the chilling fact that he had been sharing them with others painted a portrait of a man who had been hiding a much more evil side for years. The revelation of child pornography charges escalated the case in a way no one had expected. It added a new layer of danger to an already horrific story, revealing Ellington as a predator, one who had been able to hide in plain sight, sheltered by his position as a Marine and his seemingly clean military record. After weeks of intense investigation, the case against Willie Ellington was finally ready to be presented in court. The weight of the evidence against him was undeniable, and the prosecution was prepared to prove just how deeply premeditated his actions had been. The trial began in a courtroom filled with tension, where the family and friends of Tshey sat quietly in their seats, waiting for justice. The prosecution was confident, presenting a case that was built on more than just circumstantial evidence. They had the playbook, the evidence that would not only establish the murder, but also reveal the darker, more troubling side of Ellington's life. The defense attempted to argue that the evidence didn't point directly to murder, trying to downplay the significance of the Google searches and the surveillance footage. But the prosecution's case was airtight. They had everything they needed to prove that Ellington had planned a murder. It wasn't an act of passion or rage, but a carefully calculated crime. The courtroom remained tense as the witnesses testified, each detail painting a more damning picture of Ellington. Tshey's family spoke about her dreams, her sacrifices, and how her life had been stolen so suddenly, leaving her son without his mother. Her friends described the devotion she had for her son, how she had worked so hard to give him a future that she never had. They were all left to wonder how someone they never thought capable of violence could be responsible for such a senseless act. Then came the bombshell. During the trial, additional charges were brought against Ellington. The 35 counts of child pornography, which had been discovered on his phone, were read aloud. The jury listened in stunned silence as the prosecution detailed the disturbing images and videos found on his device, some showing children as young as 9 years old, enduring acts of sexual abuse. The shock of these charges seemed to hit the courtroom like a wave, deepening the horror of what had already been revealed about Ellington's character. When the verdict finally came, it was almost anticlimactic. The evidence was so overwhelming that there was little doubt left in anyone's mind. Willie Richard Ellington was convicted of first-degree murder for the death of Tshey Bennett. The courtroom was silent, but the relief on Tshey's family's faces was obvious. They had waited for this moment, hoping for justice, and now it was theirs. Then, the judge turned his attention to the additional charges, the 35 counts of child pornography. Ellington was found guilty on all counts, his dark secrets exposed for the world to see. His face remained blank, almost as if he were disconnected from the reality of his fate. It was clear that the man who had been so carefully hidden beneath the uniform of a Marine was not the man he appeared to be. The sentencing was swift. Ellington received a life sentence, without the possibility of parole for the murder of Tshey Bennett. The judge emphasized that the crime had been premeditated, that Tshey had been selected, not out of personal conflict, but because she was vulnerable, because Ellington had seen her as an easy target. The 20-year sentence for the child pornography charges would be served concurrently with a murder sentence, ensuring that Ellington would never see the outside world again. As the judge's words echoed in the courtroom, there was a quiet but profound sense of closure for Tshey's family. The justice they had hoped for was now a reality. But even as the conviction was handed down, the weight of the loss they had experienced could not be undone. Their loved one was still gone, and no sentence could ever bring her back. Tshey Bennett's loss was felt by so many, and the cost of justice was apparent. Not just in the legal victory that convicted her killer, but in the lasting consequences of her death on those who loved her. For her 8-year-old son, the world had been forever altered. Tshey had been his rock, the woman who made sure he never missed a birthday, a school event, or a moment of his childhood. Now he would grow up without her. The loss wasn't just felt by her family. It was felt in the small, everyday moments, the empty seat at the dinner table, the absence of her laugh in the living room. Tshey's son would carry that hole in his heart for the rest of his life, no matter how much time passed. Her family, too, struggled to find their footing in a world without Tshey. There were no words that could heal the wound she had left behind, but even in the midst of their pain, they did their best to keep her legacy alive. Tshey's dreams had been taken from her far too soon, but her spirit and determination lived on in those she had loved and who loved her back. Tshey's case also sparked broader conversations about the safety of women, particularly those in vulnerable professions like escorts and dancers. The public outrage was intense, and the case became a catalyst for discussing the dangers of such work and the lack of resources and protections for those who find themselves in this line of work. There were calls for stronger laws, better support systems, and greater protections for vulnerable individuals who were often ignored by society. Additionally, military personnel screening and the psychological evaluation of active duty members came under scrutiny. Many asked how someone like Willie Ellington, a Marine with a clean record and a seemingly stable career, could harbor such a dark side, one that had gone undetected until it was too late. The case underscored the importance of vigilant screening and mental health assessments for those in positions of power and authority, especially in institutions like the military. So, what do you think about this case? And if you found Tshey's story meaningful, please like this video and subscribe for more cases that explore real stories, real justice, and real change. Your support helps ensure these important stories are heard, and justice continues to be served.